Hey class. For my first tutorial video, we're going to be starting to make our hand sculptures. And so I'm going to just get started, but I thought for those of you who brought your armature home that this might actually be a useful tool for working on the hands as well as when we move on to full figures. I'm going to just use my knife primarily to get started. And for this project, we are going to be sculpting solid. So you don't need to worry about coil building or any of the techniques that we've done so far. For areas of the sculpture that are too thick, we will sculpt them or hollow them out after we're done sculpting. So I just grabbed a big chunk of clay. If you have a wood cutting board or canvas, we're just gonna get that clay softened up by wedging it. You can even do this on concrete. If you just sweep maybe your patio off before you wedge the clay so you don't get all that dust in the clay, that will work really well for getting prepped. Okay, that's pretty good. So I'm going to make my hand a little bit larger than life. You are welcome to work around life size. I think it's a little bit easier to model the details when they're enlarged. If you're trying to make it really small, every little mark is hard to get all that detail. So this will be about my palm leading down into my wrist. So for my sample pictures that I took, it was my hand holding an apple core like this. So the palm of my hand is going to be a bit curved. So if this is just the palm, not including my fingers, there's going to be kind of a cup right here. So I'm taking this big slab and I'm kind of curling that over. And so right here where the muscle of my thumb, I'm just going to kind of draw that where that's going to be. And I'll just start to identify that part of the hand there. Okay, so when I talked about using these armatures, my hand is going to be like this. So if I have these posts, say maybe going in right here, I want to get the angle right. So I'm kind of trying to match the angle of my hand. Okay. So that's going to help me to work around it, have the angle and the gesture of the hand where I'm not sitting it flat on the table. That can help me to see it a little bit easier. So I'm just going to, maybe I can find something to hold as a stand-in for that apple core. That's a little bit big. I just need kind of a spacer in my hands here. So if I have, it still is a little big. What do I use? How about one of my daughter's little toys here? Okay, got my little ring. I think that's about right size for my apple core. So the palm of, or the part of my thumb right here that's sticking out, this really needs to have even more curve to it. So I'm going to just take some clay. All of this clay is fresh out of the bag, so I don't need to worry about slipping and scoring at this point. If later on, once the clay is starting to get stiffer and you need to add clay, I do recommend slipping and scoring your clay at that point. I gotta go help the baby. Okay. Okay, hi class. Apparently my daughter did not want to take a nap yesterday, so I never got back to where I left off. But I just wrapped up the palm of my hand on this armature. And so you can see the top spike does come all the way through the hand, but that is fine. Don't worry about that hole, it will get covered up later. So last time we were just talking about this part of my hand here, right? So I have my daughter's little rattle toy as a stand-in for the apple core, and here is the angle. So that thumb is going to come off up here. So this clay is still nice and soft. So I'm just going to start adding on where that thumb is going to come off of the hand. I also am going to create a bit of a support so that not all of the weight is resting on these two little wood posts. So I'm gonna just take some clay and prop it under here. This might become the wrist, so I'll blend that in, but primarily that is just helping to hold the mass of clay up while I'm working so that it does not collapse. Okay, so just taking clay and I'm smearing it, kind of squishing it, compressing it together with the rest of that hand. So this is really coming forward, much more so. So I'm going to shift this over. Helps to accentuate kind of that cupped movement in the hand. All of this right here. And I'm going to build it out into the wrist. It's going to help me to see the shape of the hand better. It's kind of the same as if you're ever trying to sculpt a head without a neck. You really need the neck. It helps define the proportions, and there's not like a sharp line where your head meets your neck or where your hand meets your wrist. It's a pretty fluid transition, so we just want to be able to see that a little bit better. I hope that you all are having some success finding space at your house and time. I know I've found it to be difficult. It's much more distracting to be trying to work at home, So I sympathize with all of you. You know, this is, we're adapting, but it's not quite the same as being in the studio all together. But know that we're all going through it together, and it just feels good to get your hands in clay. At least for me it does. Okay. So if I look about there, my thumb, let's see, my hands are going to, my fingers are going to start separating out here. This isn't, kind of the base of my fingers there. I'll just take that clay and add it to the thumb. So as you're adding clay, you want to try and do your best to not trap air pockets between the layers that you're adding. So make sure that you kind of start with a ball and that you're adding and then kind of smearing it outward. And that is going to help make sure that you're not going to trap air, which could later make the sculpture explode in the kiln. We are going to cut these apart and hollow them out for the areas of the hand that are too thick. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, you can work preventatively. That will save you time later. Okay. I think I need a little bit more clay spanning this gap. Here, I'll rotate that so you can see it a little bit better. This gap between the thumb and forefinger, right? So this angle kind of sloping outward. So I'm gonna, that forefinger is really, you know, that and the thumb are gonna get connected. So I really wanna make sure that I'm getting that part of the gesture correct. And I'm just taking wads of clay and really just kind of smearing and blending them down. You can just squeeze that. And I believe the angle of this needs to be closer to that. You know, that hand is really not vertical. It's at a tilt. I have a deep crease right here. Right there. So this part of my hand becomes a little flatter. And that's really kind of a plane change. So really this whole part of the hand, that angle is different, right? Because my hand is really going down like that. Nice thing about working at home is I can have my coffee while I work. Normally teaching the night class, I don't want to drink caffeine that late at night. Little pleasures of being quarantined. Okay. Before I get too far into the rest of the hand, I really want to make that apple core, bridge that gap between the thumb and forefinger. So this is going to, again, we just want to get these connected, and then we're going to model it more later. But getting everything connected, getting all the parts on before you get stuck in the details is going to make for a better connection, because the clay is going to want to stick to itself much better while it's nice and wet. And when you're working with gesture, you have to move it around a lot. It's one of the advantages of working solid, is you can really flush in the entire composition quite quickly, and then you can go and refine from that point. So I'm just grabbing my little spray bottle. If you have a spray bottle, then you know there's a lot of wind here, so the clay is wanting to dry out a little faster than it would indoors. So just keep these things in mind as you're working. So that finger really comes off at quite an angle. So this whole pinky is starting a bit lower. Really got to kind of curl that around. There we go. That next finger comes down on top. I think that pinky needs to be a little longer though. So I posted on Canvas pictures of my hand from different angles of this posture. I recommend that you all take pictures of your hand from different angles, get help if you have a spouse or a kid or a neighbor, friend who's able to kind of take pictures from directly above from the 4 directions. So you should have 5 pictures, because right now I can really only see my front angle. It's going to be hard for me to not alter the gesture if I rotate my hand. So if you can have pictures from the back and the sides, that's really going to help you as you start to model your hand. Okay, I'm going to just get that wrist is coming out at a bit of an angle forward. So I'm just going to add that. I'm going to keep this block here that's helped supporting the weight of this sculpture. And these 2 wood posts going in are going to help it from tipping over. I find that armature can really help to hold the right angle instead of having to pick the sculpture up each time. All right, so I'm going to pause there. I'll see you all at 4:30 for our class meeting online, and I look forward to seeing the progress that you're making.